this is Ellen Donnelly, CEO of Abliva. I hope you've enjoyed our short videos focused on the development of therapeutics for patients with mitochondrial disease. Today we'll speak with two experts on the rationale and benefits for developing therapeutics for rare diseases. In the US, companies developing drugs for these diseases with prevalence of less than 200,000, can apply for a designation as an orphan drug. This so-called ODD designation brings a number of benefits to the company, everything from tax credits to market exclusivity for 7 years to competitive pricing. Today we'll speak with Lars Frick, financial analyst, and Frank Sasinowski, US regulatory expert, on the benefits of developing a drug with ODD status and the history behind this designation. Enjoy.
Well, I can see several factors that speak in favor of the orphan drug segment of the market. One is pricing. Since an orphan drug, by definition, is new to the market, it creates more flexibility in terms of pricing. It's usually, due to the designation being for narrow drugs, it usually means simple distribution. Maybe there's a few clinics around the world that is experts in the area, so you have a faster uptake in the market and easier access for the pharmaceutical companies working in this sector. Of course, the unmet need, the high need among patients creates favorable conditions for, in terms of risk reward from a company perspective, that you can have a higher probability of success. So there are several factors that make this a very, very interesting segment of the market. I definitely think so. At least in the Nordic, and I think it's a general trend that if you look back, let's say 10, 20 years ago, orphan drugs was almost unheard of and treated a bit, well, as a side business or even sort of a runoff for the bigger pharmaceuticals who were all aiming for the blockbuster designations. Then fast forward and seeing the low probability of success aiming for the really, really big indications, investor sentiment has swung completely, and now I think the orphan drug segment is by far the most interesting within pharmaceuticals, or at least one of the most interesting.
Would you say there are any advantages for mitochondrial diseases in that act?
Yes. In fact, the original author of that law, this might be more information than your audience wants to know, but the original author, Congressman Henry Waxman, well known in the United States, that when he wrote his book later, cataloging all of his lifetime achievements as a well-known legislator in the U.S. Congress, the Clean Water Act and the Orphan Drug Act were his two most important achievements. But when he wrote the Orphan Drug Act, he thought that tax credits would be the number one incentive so that a company like Abliva or companies pursuing mitochondrial disease would be looking for tax credits, U.S. tax credits, to incentivize them to invest in therapies for rare diseases, rare mitochondrial diseases. But it didn't work out that way. It turns out that what became the real incentive was a period of 7 years of monopoly pricing. That for 7 years, the U.S. government would enforce a monopoly and would prevent others from also developing the same therapy for the same condition. So that 7 years of government-enforced monopoly was a huge incentive for people to pour in to the orphan drug field, like for mitochondrial diseases. In fact, there had been a commission set up before this law that was sponsored by the drug industry. In those days, it was called PMA. Today in the United States, it's called PhRMA, the big trade association. And they set up the PMA Commission on Drugs of Limited Commercial Significance. That was the title of the report they came out with, because they were concerned that people with rare diseases like mitochondrial diseases that are very serious had no one paying any attention to them, not doing any research in their areas. And so they, as an industry, were concerned. And that report kind of summarizes how little there was in this field until the Orphan Drug Act. And then the Orphan Drug Act came along. It created this monopoly. And I think that monopoly pricing said that you as a sponsor, as an industry developer of a rare disease for mitochondrial disease, don't have to depend upon your patent protections, that you have to then go out and vigorously enforce by finding someone who might be violating your patent, bringing them to the court. And there's always uncertainty whenever you go into court as whether you'll be successful. Here it was, the government was going to become your shield against other competitors. So it was a great incentive. So I hope that explains why I think now we have so many companies like Abliva and many others, even in the mitochondrial field, investing in trying to find therapies that will alleviate the suffering of our sisters and brothers with these conditions.